the final chapter of the Bankers Leadership Series, entitled Extending Data Analytics from the Boardroom to the Frontline, we're going to look at sort of the future of business intelligence and data analytics. So I'm going to start with a question with Chave, which is really around, how do you think the democratization of data can really help the bank of the future?
Well, I think thanks to that we could be more efficient because, for example, at this moment we have hundreds of people in the headquarters whose day job is just preparing information for the rest of the people. We are promoting at this moment, for example, self-service data discovery or analysis and analytics, just that, because with that we can optimize very well the efforts that we are doing at this moment to preparing information for many people. And another point, to have a democratization and to have a corporate model, a single version of the truth, will help us also in all the regulatory issues, because we have to send information to the markets, to the boardroom, to the regulators. We have to explain the same to all of them, and this is one of the points that we can get with this.
I think that's really interesting. So for me, democratization it's a change, it's an evolution of what the bank is and what it's become. It's no longer this big concrete building with iron gates and guards outside, but it is still the custodian of that. But I think the way in which we interact is very different. So it's becoming much more of an ecosystem where, I'm sure we'll come on to startups and other interactions later, but these are inherent parts of the bank. It's no longer a single entity. And also the way we interact with customers, partners, and other parts of the organization is also evolving a lot. So I think those are all key bits for me that feed into the democratization. And I think it's very much in that process. There is no answer. I don't think anyone's got that sorted yet.
Data and its dissemination across the organization has become something that I think we're only barely touching the surface of what it's capable of doing. And what's interesting to me is we've discussed here an awful lot of different use cases, approaches and governance to the way that you can do that, but I think we're only just touching the surface. So I think if I was to point to one thing that I think the bank tries to do is we try to think about this openly and broadly and figure out exactly what that can mean for us.
Well, there are so many new types of emerging technology. People have to talk about robots and artificial intelligence, machine learning, and I think all of those have a place. And I think some of those techniques can be used to simplify the answering of questions, to try and make things easier for people, easier for customers as well as employees. But like self-service, in order for these things to work, we have to have a very good handle on the basics first. So all we said earlier about data and around data governance, data security, how we manage data needs to be better than ever. If we're going to allow systems like artificial intelligence to act upon that data, we need to be very clear about what data it's allowed to look at and in what context. So yes, there's huge opportunity here for us, but we have to get the basics right first and really build a platform for analytics, for self-service environments, for the web, for mobile and location-based services, but also for the more advanced and emerging technologies to sit on top of.
Let's just put that in context, right? So there was a study done a couple of years ago where they said the volume of financial flows has increased about twofold over the last 5 years. But the volume of information or data flows has gone up 43-fold. So not only does that very clearly define the opportunity, but it also, to your point, presents the problem statement in and of itself. We've got to be very careful we don't get lost in that noise. And so understanding we're creating lots and lots of information every single day is useful. But it's, as I think we've always said within this, it's what you do with it that really is important.
So do you think business intelligence will really help banks compete in the sea of the FinTech startups that we're seeing, to your point earlier, Daniel?
So I think FinTech startups, it's a huge area. It's exploded over recent years, let's go with. They're going to be a part of that space. I think the question is more how you partner with them. So certainly Barclays, several of the other banks have incubators or startup hubs. And the question then is, how do we harbour these technologies and encourage their growth? It's actually a better way of servicing the customer, servicing the client. But how do we work together to make sure we're getting the best out of it and deploying it in the best way? So many of these they're still at a nascent stage of development. There are very few broad scales. We don't see an AI walking around the streets yet. So the question is, how, in those very niche use cases, how can they be deployed effectively?
Chafe?
No, I think it will help to treat with fintechs, because we have learned a lot of things about them, because they are agile, and we have to be agile also. And they know how to treat the new generation of customers, and we also want to do that. Business intelligence will help to do all these matters. We want to focus to be very agile in giving a response, giving an answer to the customer when they had a need, and also to know better the customers and how they are moving, how they are working, and all these things.
I think, to me, it's the personification of an experience that's enriched by the information. So if I think about things like machine learning constructs, which have been created because fintechs have challenged us to think differently, what they're really saying is that there is a new digital business model out there, and that creates a lot of opportunities for us. And in fact, if I think about my children, they expect a very enriched experience compared to me. I just want the ATM to work. They're expecting a much more personal experience, but under a set of common standards. Well, that comes about because of the business intelligence and the information landscape that we can bring to them. So things like Amazon Echo, the Apple Siri, we have Erica in our banks. These are all kind of constructs that enable you to interact in a very different way. And some of that thinking came about because of, to your point, disruptive thinking, and people sort of challenged asking a very simple question, which is, how can I do that? And do I still want to do it the same way I've always done it?
And it's very challenging for the banks, because the fintech companies are coming along with new techniques for how they present information to their customers and making the experience comparable with that of a retailer. Right. And the customer wants that, but at the same time, the customer really wants their money to be safe. So it's combining the old-fashioned values with the new ones. It's quite a challenge.
The governance standard, trust and security, with the innovation and agility. So those two things often sit.
But I think you see it as a consumer-led innovation, right? So we all have consumer areas of our banks. I tend to find that in that space is where you see most of the innovation being driven. It's right at the forefront of that client experience. And then as you move it back within the corporate investment tiers, that's where you start, to your point. We all have the same common set of values, but it's harder to do it there because macro size and scale and everything else. So the consumer space provides us with a great opportunity to partner with these companies to really think about that client experience.
But do you think artificial intelligence is really going to have sort of the biggest impact on business intelligence in the future?
I just think it's one part of a much broader mix.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we are learning a lot of things about artificial intelligence and cognitive, and I think it will open doors about how to treat with customers and how to offer better services.
I think we think about, in the way that you use a web browser nowadays, is you kind of type in a very human learning sort of phrase. Where can I find the nearest coffee shop? So to me, machine learning and artificial intelligence is about understanding the true meaning behind that. Are you looking for a coffee shop because you're thirsty? Are you looking for it because you want to go and sit there and hook up on the internet? Or are you looking for it because you want to have a meeting there or something else? It's connecting those secondary level intentions, I think, to me, is where it becomes very interesting. Now, you can apply that in the business space too. I mean, why would a company be seeking to issue debt, for example? I'm not saying that you have all the answers, but that to me is where we're beginning to understand, I guess, the thinking and the learning behind how our customers execute and practice their trade. And that for me is where we can get very close with them in terms of enriching that client experience, because we're almost anticipating some of the things that they might be looking for. So ironically, and on a very welcome basis, I would say that enrichment of the client experience will come over time. But to your point, it is an emergent technology that I think although there's a lot of money in it, there's a lot of things that we have to kind of figure out on the way.
Okay, great. So this concludes the Bankers Leadership Series on data analytics in association with CLIC. I'd just like to thank my panelists. It was a very interesting discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.